is sort of not ready for. But like, have you seen what's up on the iPlayer at the moment?
No, I don't think so.
Threads.
Oh, Threads. Yes, no, I did see that. I need to.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah, I need to hit record.
There's a
bad boy.
You know, it is probably one of the most brilliant pieces of fiction I've ever come across. In the sense that it is 100% successful.
Sure.
Like there's no ambiguity to it. What it wants to do, what it wants to talk about, the reaction it wants to evoke in its audience, it does it, and it does it unambiguously, you know?
Right.
But bloody hell, I've watched it twice in my life now, and that might be it.
Yeah. So did you rewatch it? Did you rewatch it recently?
Yeah, when it came up on the iPlayer, I did. So, yeah, I mean, I hadn't seen it for years. I hadn't seen it for a long, long time. So that thing had happened where scar tissue developed, and you mental scar tissue, and you forget the effect that it had when you first watched it.
So I think what I might do is, because that'll still be kicking around, I might get that myself, and then maybe we can reconvene on that one, because I've never seen it.
So, no, really?
Yeah. So that could be a fun conversation. Well, I mean, I feel like I feel like as someone who inflicted the finite upon the world, I should probably.
I'm actually kind of surprised, because I was watching it and thinking, this must have been an influence on the finite. I was watching it thinking this must have been like one of the key, alongside When the Wind Blows, this must have been one of the key texts that fed into the finite. But no, really, wow.
It just shows you how much it was in the air, though, doesn't it? Because
well, that's the other thing.
How good When the Wind Blows is, to be fair, but yeah.
Right. I mean, that's the other thing. I think that's what's so stark about Threads in particular. It's the fact that this was a real, legitimate fear. This was something that was round the corner.
Yeah, absolutely.
And Threads makes that absolutely clear. It's what the success of its horror derives from the fact that it's barely fiction. Yeah. It is more or less an alternative reality documentary.
Sure.
And that is horrifying. I mean, it is one of the most horrifying texts I've ever come across, because it's pitiless. It's utterly pitiless.
Right.
It's dark. It's so well researched as well. I mean, what it shows you is as close to reality as fiction is going to get in terms of what would happen if a nuclear weapon went off over the UK. You know, and it is the end. It's that as well. It's a self-inflicted extinction.
Yeah.
It's not even slow, you know. I mean, for most people, it'll be pretty fast, but for a significant number, it won't be.
Yeah.
Humanity might sort of go along in drips and dregs for a little while, trying to eke out some fairly pathetic semblance of an existence, and a fairly tortuous one at that. Yeah. But that's it. That is it. Maybe a generation or two. It's over.
Yep.
You know, and that's what Threads gets at. It is the most amazing piece of fiction, and it's the kind of thing I feel like not just the fiction, but the reality of what it was recording, what it was communicating, should have seen a sea change in our assumptions of society. But did they? Did they really? I'm not sure. Yeah. The threat is still there. That threat is there. Yeah, but it's kind of escalating again, given current political circumstances. And it feels to me like what's happened more is that it was so horrifying that people have kind of maybe buried their heads in the sand a little bit. They've done that thing that human beings do, God bless them, and cultures, actually, whole societies do, where they are able to compartmentalize and just like, oh, well, yes, this is a thing. It's horrifying, but we've got like bills to pay, and we've got, we've got to like get the car repaired, and the toilet's not working and whatnot. There's this incredible distractionism that happens with humanity and these kinds of events. I mean, it's like, fucking hell, what we're talking about this evening as well. You love poking the fucking hornet's nest, you do. I mean, I know I know I'm going to lose subscribers. In fact, I'd be lucky if I don't get pilloried for this. Right? Just having it on the channel, the minute people read the fucking title, they're going to be like, no, no. It's, there are certain things, there are just certain subjects that people they just do not want to talk about. They don't want to hear people talk about it. And this is one of them.
Yeah, I mean, that's all true. I think as well, I'd say, look, I mean, before we get onto that, also, like, I mean, everything you said about nuclear weapons is true. It also applies, of course, to climate change. We're still burying our heads in the sands in that,
Yes. I mean, funnily enough, I've got a My Life in Horror article, partially inspired by Threads, but partially by just something that's been gnawing inside my head for a long time, about that very thing. It's about that very thing. It's called The Power Is Yours.
Oh, Captain Planet, right?
Yeah, the Captain Planet.
Ah, yes. I'm really glad. You and I have kicked that around a few times. I'd be I'm looking forward to reading that. That sounds awesome. Yeah.
This is an intense one. It's a dark one as well. It's a dark one because it is a kind of like child of the late 80s, early 90s, railing against the imposition. It's that what I've taken a look at is how does that make you feel? When you understand, when you start to understand that this ostensibly empowering message is not empowering at all. It's a lie. It's a fucking lie for a start. It's a complete lie. It's a lie that's coming from something that has hijacked the ecological message for the purposes of commercialism. That's a thing. It's completely hypocritical because even the production of the cartoon of Captain Planet would have caused, ecological damage, let alone all of the spin-off material and the toys, and which are now rotting away. Well, not rotting because they were plastic, so just sat there. The video games, the packaging, the flights that would have been necessary to transport all of this, the actors, the electricity that was used, blah 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 blah. That aside, it's also the fact that when it's a euphemism, right? Like so much, you have to sort of look past the language that's used and look at the implication. So the cartoon, and lots of cartoons from that era, actually, lots of children's media from that era did this to one degree or another. It says the power is yours. That was always the slogan of Captain Planet, and it broke the fourth wall. It talked directly to the audience. It was talking to kids who were like 5 to 12, and telling them that they had the power over these great, massive corporate systems that, by the way, at that point were off the chain. Because there was no, thanks to Thatcherism, thanks to Reaganism, thanks to neoliberalism, there was hardly anything holding them back from doing whatever the fuck they wanted. Beyond that, what it's actually doing is imposing responsibility. It's based underneath the seemingly empowering sort of Technicolor message. What it's actually saying is, oh yeah, by the way, planet's fucked, but we're not going to do anything about it. You kids do it. Yep. You're the ones that you're the ones that are going to have to suffer with it when you grow up eventually. You and your kids are the ones that are going to have to do it. So when it says the power is yours, what it actually means is responsibility is yours, and Suck's done it.
Yeah,
that's what it actually means. That's what it actually means.
And also, it isn't in any meaningful way, because you're not ever, none of the people who hear that message are ever going to be in a position of power such that they can affect the massive systemic change that's necessary to turn the oil tanker around. Right? Exactly this. It is such a scurrilous, insincere, and underneath it, when you really start analyzing it, dark expression of intergenerational abuse. It's a really vile thing, and that's what it's about. It's about, like, also the article talks about, like, having that in your mind before you even realize any of that, when you're still a child and you still have these messages of, like, constant. It's not just the ecological collapse. When we were kids, we were having media that was telling us constantly the world was about to end. Whether it was Threads, which, by the way, was shown in some schools. It's like, Jesus, whether it was When the Wind Blows, whether it was our cartoons, our comics, our media, all of it was telling us, to one degree or another, the world is going to collapse. It's either economic collapse, or it's pandemics, or it's the Cold War, it's nuclear Armageddon, it's ecological collapse. What does that do to you psychologically when you're carrying this around as a kid? What does it do to you? I mean, that is a sort of key thing about the essay.
what did it do to me? What did it do to us? You know, to
Yeah.
have that in your heads all the time from the youngest possible age. What does
Yeah.
it do in terms of your relation to society, to culture? Does it make you kind of withdraw from it? Or does it inculcate this sense of displacement and divorce? Because that's something I remember feeling as a child, and it's only gotten more profound as I've gotten older. That sense of being apart from things, outside the systems looking in, you know?
Well, yeah, and that's partly at least because I mean, if you get beyond the first layer of propaganda of it all, and you realise like the central message, as you say, of the power is in your hands, is a fairly gigantic and transparent lie.
Yeah.
You also realise that the solutions it's proposing are based on that premise of a lie, and therefore you think, well, what's the fucking point? And
I mean, the
what that
cartoons,
second wave
yeah,
but what that second wave achieves then is it cuts you off from the only potential solution there actually are to these systemic problems, which is to say, no, the power is not in my
right.
hands, your hands, but the power is collectively in
It's
our
collective,
hands,
right? It's
or could
collective.
be, but only
But
if we act in a collective way. And that's
yeah,
the
there's
very,
no
very, very
way.
last thing they want you to think of
Right.
ever.
There is no way a cartoon that was made by a billionaire, Ted Turner,
Hmm.
and had that corporate backing was ever going to say a message like that. Oh, the power is all of you. It comes from, it's not innate, it's not magical,
Yep.
it's not like the individual, it's movement. It's all of you acting together as one. It's
They
communication.
they
This is
fear
the other thing.
collectivism more than anything else.
They so do. And this is the other thing about the fucking cartoon, right? It makes that, I mean, it's not an error, it's just the way it is.
Yeah.
It's part of its actual identity and ideology as opposed to the ideology that it advertises or pretends. The solutions it provides are magical.
Yeah.
So no solutions at all. You know, it's, oh, you can summon Captain Planet and he will just magically solve all the problems.
Yeah.
Also, this is another point in the essay that I make. The show profoundly refuses to acknowledge that the problems are systemic. It profoundly refuses to
Oh
acknowledge that
yeah.
that's the case. It's a few bad actors.
It
Oh, it's
was
a
a bad
few
idea.
bad
Yeah.
people.
Yeah.
It's these people who are doing it. And I mean, like, fucking eco villains in Captain Planet, they're fucking ridiculous. They have no depth at all, no motivation beyond, oh, I'm just going to pollute for no reason. I'm just going to ruin this ocean for no reason. There's no ulterior, like, it's not even like as a byproduct of
Yeah.
greed or anything like that. They're eco supervillains. It's just like, I'm just going to pollute because I like doing it because it's fun, right? It refuses to acknowledge the actual problems and it refuses to provide actual solutions. It just keeps insisting in this really kind of aggressive way. You've got to do something. It's up to you. It's your responsibility. And it's like, you know, these kids at home, for the most part, I mean, for one thing, for the most part, it's impotent anyway because it's a cartoon, and kids of that age are not watching cartoons to get a message like that out of it. They're not going to be receiving it in that way. That's something that adults think about. That's the way adults communicate, right? Kids are just going to watch it and then they're going to go play. Yeah, they're going to go do something else. So it's completely impotent for a start, and also any kid worth their salt is going to react against it. They're going to be like, well, why? You know, I haven't done anything. I didn't do this. I'm not out there like destroying the world or anything.
Yeah, but the villains have to be cardboard cutouts because if they give the villains any kind of realistic motivation whatsoever, it might inadvertently point the kids watching it in the direction of the people who are actually
Exactly that.
liable for this situation, and it can't do that.
No, it's that inability to like acknowledge systemic problems. That is something that is pervasive in our culture, our societal systems. We don't like doing it. We don't
Well,
like doing it. I mean, it hurts us in some fundamental way, you know?
I love superhero comics. I love superhero stories, but it's a fundamental inbuilt flaw with the superhero, culture in general. Anyway, and it's why Captain Planet was always going to be a failure because it's always about individual action and it's always about individual villains. And the villains
magical
are always,
solutions, right?
Yeah,
magical solutions.
because the villains are always effectively motiveless, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, they're not then most of them are not motivated by anything we would recognize as being a real world concern. Because again,
Right.
as soon as you start engaging that in a meaningful way, you start talking about, or you know, you start implicating there may be some issues with social structures, and
Exactly.
that's,
Exactly.
if you'll forgive the analogy, that's kind of kryptonite to
That's that. Yeah.
certain political systems. Yeah.
Yeah. That's very good.
Thanks.
Yes, very good. But no, you're absolutely right, and it also really doesn't throw the heroes in a flattering light, because what it reveals is ultimately they are scions of the status quo, right?
Right.
You
And
look
not,
at
yeah,
the
not
Avengers, you look at Batman, you look at Superman. Ultimately, with all their power, with all their potential, what they do is protect the status quo, no matter how dark and unjust and unpleasant the status quo is. That's all they do.
yeah, not to send us back to a subject that's perennially fascinated us for a few years, and no, I haven't seen the sequel yet, but I mean that's one
Oh,
of the reasons we found Joker so incendiary, right? It's
exactly.
because it at least gestured at systemic failures, systemic issues in a way that indicted not just certain members of the Batman universe, such as, you know, Bruce Wayne's father, although it certainly did
Yeah.
that, but by implication, certain real world figures as well, which was,
Mhm.
you know, courageous is a very strong word to use about a multimillionaire Hollywood movie based on a superhero
Yeah.
franchise. But it was, at least at the very least, it was unusual, and I think from our perspective, quite welcome.
Absolutely. I mean that's exactly why I've had my reaction to Folie
Mm.
à Deux, which I did, which is it's a more difficult film than the
Mm.
first one, but I think it could be more brilliant actually.
I'm really excited to get to it. I've seen a lot
It's
of interesting critical reaction to it.
yeah, me too, me too. And once again, I find them from all over the political spectrum, and almost
Right.
all of them
Feel to be missing the point
flawed.
somewhat.
Yeah, massively flawed criticisms of this work. And again, once again, it seems to contain the answers. The work itself contains the
Sure.
answers when you step back, from ideology, and
Sure.
you just look at it for what it is and what it is attempting.
Well,
Um,
I'm excited to go and see it. The only thing that I did see at FantasyCon, which and it was from a critic who I have an awful lot of time for and usually enjoy, was they said that they thought it was awful and brilliant in its awfulness, and it was
yeah,
the
I mean,
they said, and this is the phrase I thought was interesting. They thought it was the best worked example of malicious compliance they'd ever seen in their lives.
you know what? Yeah, I would go with that. I would
Mm.
go with that. It is a really spiky, thorny, nasty film, even more so than the original, I would say, because it's reacting to reactions to the original film,
Right.
and it's also got its own project. It's also
Sure.
got its own project, its own message, and it doesn't care if you like it or like the way that it's telling it.
Yeah.
It just goes for it. It knows what it wants to say. It knows its core criticisms, and it just gives them to you. There's reasons for everything. There are
Sure.
reasons and poetry for every little thing that's going on in this film, including the format of a musical, by the way.
Okay.
That is very important to the film. It's very important, and to the themes that the film is playing with. I mean, we'll talk about it. I'm sure
We certainly
we'll
will.
get
Yeah.
Jack, and we'll probably get Elliot
Yeah.
as well, and whoever else wants to talk about it, and we'll talk about it. But I mean, again, I mean, like what we're discussing tonight. Actually, I think talking about Joker Folie à Deux and talking about it in a positive light, actually might get us some flack. To be honest,
Yeah. Oh, it's possible. I mean, it's, well, we seem to be entering a strange new phase, don't we?
it does seem to be that way. I mean, like, I think people do often come to this channel expecting a certain thing. They come expecting a certain perspective or a certain like ideological perspective.
Mm.
Which is fair enough, I suppose. But at the same time, you have to respect that we are not our ideology. We have our own positions and experiences with regards to certain things. And like, I mean, the spiky thing about the subject tonight is people, like I said before, people just don't like talking about it. I mean, it's not just that they
Yeah.
don't like talking about it, it's what I talked about with Threads, People have this weird ability to scab over in their own minds, and particularly with regards to trauma, like cultural trauma,
Yeah.
trauma
Absolutely.
that affects us culture-wide, things that really upset the apple cart. We scab over, and then we start to view it through these these distorted lenses. So more recently, we had oh, this is going to get the whole channel demonetized, by the way, and this video buried. But COVID, if you say COVID, etc., if you say COVID or pandemic or lockdown, that gets the video sort of like buried. But that's, have you spoken to people in the UK about that recently? There is this, like, it's like a dream to them now. There's
Yeah,
this thing that's
absolutely.
happened where it's only been a matter of a few years, right?
Yep,
Since
yep.
the lockdowns, and people have like rewritten it in their own minds. I've spoken to people, perfectly reasonable people, normal people, not conspiracy theorists, not people who are like naturally paranoid or anything like that, who have any kind of like particular mental health problem other than the pervasively cultural that we all suffer with. And they have rewritten it in their minds. They've rewritten it with regards to their own cushioning narrative. So I hear people say things like, "Oh, we maybe it wasn't so bad. It wasn't as bad as we thought it was. Oh, maybe we shouldn't have locked down for so long. Maybe that caused more damage." Motherfucker, more nurses died during
Right,
COVID than in World War II.
right.
I work in care, and I mean, we were lucky because we kept the fucker out, but
Yeah.
I was in contact with care homes during the
Oh,
early days where
oh,
people were dropping like flies.
yeah, yeah.
They were dropping like flies. Carers, doctors. I know people who've had it like multiple times, and it's damaged them. It has
Yeah.
damaged. My brother had a fucking pulmonary embolism on the
Right,
back of it. You
right.
know,
Yeah,
and my brother's a bodybuilder, by the way. He is fit as fuck. He
yeah,
is like he's the antithesis of me. He is really physical. He's really like, he's a
yeah,
guy. He's a real sort of guy is my brother. It's knackered him.
yeah.
It has fucked his immune system 3 ways from Sunday. He's always ill. He's always got some sort of respiratory problem. And it has really made him very, very, very weak. This is the phenomena. People have rewritten it in their minds.
Yeah,
It's
and
a sort of coping mechanism, right?
there's all this stuff off the back of it as well. I mean, let's first acknowledge that obviously we do have a media ecosystem that has a vested interest in,
Mhm.
aggressively policing the status quo and therefore, touting a return to normal as soon as possible. But I don't know about you. Every time now I see a newspaper article, and we see them fairly regularly about, issues with getting people into employment level work in public in public facing services in particular. And there's been a wave of think piece over the last 18 months. Why don't people want to do this kind of work anymore? Or why can't we find enough people wanting to do this kind of work and all that kind of thing? And there's all kinds of stuff about God knows what. There's all kinds of stuff about fucking millennials and they're lazy, whatever, right? And it's like, how many of them fucking died? How many frontline facing members of staff just fucking died as a result?
Exactly that. Or on the back of being seriously ill from treating other people, are now incapable of doing that work anymore.
Well, this is it.
Or just don't want to do it because they're afraid. They've been traumatized by it.
Yeah.
This is because we don't have any systems in place, and I mean zero, nothing to deal with cultural trauma. We have nothing in place to deal with it. I mean, all we've got are things like media. We've got the BBC, oh, brilliant. We've got Channel 4, brilliant. We've got ITV, wonderful. We've got the internet, bloody Nora. We haven't got any actual systems for dealing with. We don't even have an acknowledgement of cultural trauma. That's the thing. It's almost like a wishy-washy subject. If people bring it up, it's quickly sort of like shunted aside or questioned. And we haven't coped. We haven't coped, and we are dealing with it. We're not dealing with it. What we're actually doing is letting it damage us. We're letting it traumatize us over and over and over again, and settle in as a series of neuroses. I mean, the rise of the anti-trans narrative that we have in this culture, that we have in the UK. I think you can very seriously, in part, look at the traumas that we have suffered culturally, pervasively, and part of that hideousness derives from that trauma. People are looking for an outlet, for a scapegoat, for something upon which to dump all of their trauma. Unfortunately, trans people have gotten the short end of the stick in that regard. Why? Because they're an easy target. You know, because they're ready-made. They're an easy target. It's just like queer people in general. You know, it's like gay people in the 1980s and in the 1970s. That's part. It's not all of it. There's a lot of other stuff. It's incredibly complex, but I do think that is part of it. There's a kind of scapegoating, trauma dumping that's happening here.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's always a danger, and I think, I mean, I would say this, but I think it's a particularly pervasive issue in the right wing mindset where the blame can never land at the feet of members of that movement, and therefore they have to. I mean, scapegoating's built into that, right?
It's built in. It's absolutely built in.
Part
Yeah,
of the design. You know, it's a feature, not a bug, as they say.
it is. But were we operating in any kind of healthy system, then we would know that. We wouldn't allow for it. It would be absurd. But it's something that we allow at the table, and we kind of consider, oh, well, you know, we've got to hear them out, haven't we? No, we don't.
Not really. No, and the version, it's funny, the version of this that I keep thinking about, and it kind of relates to the main topic of our conversation as well. It's like,
I love the fact that we're not mentioning it, by the way. I love the fact that and you know, this is the fact that we're not mentioning it, because like, I know how this is going to go down, because I remember having trying to have conversations with people after the event, you know, and it was impossible. I mean, some people even claim not to know what I was talking about, and it's like, I
see that so much now. I can't tell you, like, not to do it before we do it, but like, when I was researching this book, you know, when I was looking back and thinking, well, you know what, it's been 5 years, right? It's been 5 years, and actually, I kind of, I mean, this shows you how naive I am, I guess. I kind of thought post-COVID it would help, because I figured, like, with all of that in everyone's foremind, maybe it would give a bit of perspective to, I mean, let's face it, next to COVID, it was unpleasant and it was very, very fucking strange. But it was
unpleasant and weird, but it wasn't like, I mean, but you say that, I mean, yeah, that's true. It's true on like an individual level, but I mean, we're kind of jumping the gun a little bit here, but I think part of the reason people will talk about COVID. I'll talk about COVID till
that's true.
In their own, you know, within the parameters that are set within like their own narratives, they will talk about it. There are articles, there's discussions, there's all sorts of stuff out there. It's just not very good. It's just not very helpful, right? But they won't talk about this. They won't even allow you. This is taboo. This is absolutely taboo. And one of the reasons why that's true is because, unlike COVID was an external invader to the systems, right? It was something. Or you can at least market it that way. It was a disease that came in and it disrupted the systems, the powers that be, and therefore it's something we can sort of psychologically cope with. This wasn't. This is something that occurred within our assumptions of society, within the systems, and not only that, it really showed up how fucking contrived and ridiculous they all are. It really showed up something fundamental, this did. And I think that's why it was buried so quickly. You know, I think it's why we've shunted it away so quickly, and why we've got this. I mean, I'll be honest, in the days after, I thought I was sincerely having a Mandela effect. Like really, because people were like acting as though it never. Look at it now. Type in Millionaire's Day on YouTube, and you don't really find anything.
Nothing.
You don't really find anything. Google, it's not there. It's not there. People don't talk about it. And, you know, I know you can get so conspiracy about this, and people are going to say that. You know, people are going to say that, right? I mean, but you've had it, haven't you? You've had it. You've actually had people like, you know, really like, really being like vitriolic about it. And I really hazard to say we are not that.
No,
we are not that. We are not like flat earthers or anti-vaxxers or anything like that. But that's the level. That is the level of sort of that's the way they pillory you, right?
Yeah. I mean, what the hell? I'll name names. I mean, I'm hoping we're going to be able to resolve it, but I've had a massive falling out with Jasper Bark over this.
Yes, I saw that.
You know, it's really upsetting because we've been good friends for a number of years. We've got a podcast together, the Ultimate Horror Anthology, which is doing great guns. And you know, at the moment, I don't know, man. I don't know if there's going to be a season 2 because I don't know how I'm supposed to deal with that. I mean, the level of The thing that bothers me about it, right? I mean, the reason it's probably worth backtracking here. Like the reason that like you can't find anything on Google and you won't find any people talking about it on the internet is like because unlike COVID, which I think perhaps just because it was a global phenomenon, because it snuck up a little bit, there was you couldn't have controlled it even if you'd wanted to. But this, like, when it was happening, the day it was happening, one of the reasons I think that people have this really strong, like you said, Mandela effect is it never made it to social media. Ever.
Right.
It never made it to the news media. It never made it anywhere. So whatever control mechanisms there are, and so I've got to be honest, it's one of those things when you start thinking about it, it makes you nervous because I always think like the government's not really that good at shit like this.
Right. Likewise, but then I mean, it does make you paranoid, doesn't it? Because there must be something. Because there would
message
be
management was just insane.
There must have been people trying to upload like videos, like Twitch streamers or YouTube. There must have been somebody out there saying, "Just found this fucking."
I mean, people tweeting, right? Like it was 2019. Right. Twitter wasn't the dumpster fire it is today.
It was actually at its height then, wasn't it? It was right, and it was everywhere.
It was still called Twitter. Why was there no hashtag? I mean, all right, maybe not millionaires, maybe case day or like hashtag £1,000,000 or where's my money or anything like that. Nothing, not a goddamn thing. I mean, I have talked to people who tried to post about it and said that the post just vanished immediately.
Yes, I have, when you can actually draw people on that, there are so few people who are actually willing to, I mean, even that, like the real, I mean, I know I provided a kind of schema or explanation for that in the fact that people just really don't want to talk about it, but that's not the entirety of it, is it? Because
no, it's not.
It's so sincere. Like the taboo of it is almost like it's like striking up a conversation about incest or something, Right. People just won't. They will not talk to you. I mean, I remember the day because like I had an almost argument with my mate. I was actually over at a friend's,
right,
when it happened. I thought they were fucking about. Sure. I thought it was some weird joke, and I was like, I remember getting a little bit irate because I thought it was in poor taste and I thought it was weird and strange, I mean, it's fine now. It's fine, It's one of those things we kind of just don't talk about because I think that was the first time I don't get angry that easily with my friends or whatever. It's very rare people actually see me lose my temper. I
tell you what's so funny. I had an exact replication of that when I came to bring this book out. And I approached a bunch of people about, would you be willing to talk about? And I got to say as well, a lot of respect. You agreed to do this, and all respect in the world for that, because that took a bit of guts. Yeah,
I mean, to be honest, there is a totally selfish motivation here in the sense that it gives you an outlet. Like it's been bottled up for a bit. This has. This is the thing. Like since COVID, then there aren't correct or appropriate coping mechanisms, but at least you can have therapy. At least you can talk to people about the event and how awful it was, and how commonly awful. Right. This, I mean, like the friends who I was visiting when on the day, I mean, they are some of my best friends in the world. They really are. But will they talk about this? No. Will they talk about that day? No. We talk about everything. By the way, right. we are like we will go anywhere. They are people who don't really have that many taboos or parameters in conversation. To be perfectly honest, the stuff that we've hashed out in their living room is ridiculous. It's fucking ridiculous, But this is something. No.
Yeah. I mean, I had at least one friend who was like, I mean, but fair enough. This is someone who claims to have no recollection of the day. That's fine. I mean, whatever. But the thing was, I remember they were saying like, I don't know. This sounds. When I gave them the premise of the book, they were like, that sounds in poor taste to me. Like we're all in a situation where we're actually financially struggling. And I don't, and I was like, just read the manuscript and see what you think. And to, again, to be really fair, and I'm not naming names on this case, once they read it, they were like, okay, I'm on board. What do you need? Excellent. So that was really nice. But I think that's really telling reaction, isn't it?
It does take a bit of guts, to be honest, especially for a publisher, because they must know they are going to get a bit of shit for this. It may not be that much, but it could be. I mean, it could have some fallout,
There's a reason I went for a US publisher. I don't think I could have got this. And this is, look, I mean, I found out afterwards, Black Shuck, horrific. They both actually had some kind of bullshit as well. They had people going after them, sending them emails. Really? Yeah. No, they had. So both of them it was actually very strange because they both dropped statements on the same day, within a couple of hours of each other, which is really like, that's odd, like the timing of it, where they kind of independently said, and that was the first I knew about it, by the way. It was when they posted, but apparently, both of them had experienced depressed traffic to the site, depressed sales of both my previous titles, and the real clincher for me, and that's what made me realize I might be onto something, was the thing about how they'd had social media posts relating to my books specifically. So that would be the Finite and A Song for the End disappear. And then they both got very similar worded anonymous emails asking, in both cases, and this is interesting, not asking for the books to be withdrawn from sale, but asking them to make changes to both books.
Changes? Is there anything specific? Like what did they want changed?
Yeah. So, and this is the bit where it starts to get a bit sort of, tinfoil hat, right? But So for A Song for the End, they wanted Horrific to remove all references to the Finite protocol, which is a mechanism that gets triggered. And it's my, I thought, entirely fictional version of like.
I was going to say, didn't you make that up?
Well, I thought I did. It's about the notion that when you have a catastrophic bit of disaster, hits. Like an unmanageable disaster hits the United Kingdom, so like an atomic bomb going off in near a civilized population, something like that, right? The notion is basically, obviously, emergency services will have to go into a totally different frame of reference, a triage, and they're not going to be able to save everybody. They're not even going to be able to work in every place they normally would. And so, in my story, it's called the Finite Protocol, and it's I've used it a couple of times actually.
Yeah, it's cropped up again, once or twice, hasn't it, in your work?
Well, it's just, and like I say, I thought I'd made it up. I'm sure there is something. I mean, governments do disaster planning, so that bit isn't made up.
I cannot believe you haven't seen Threads, Kit, because this is in it. It's not called the Finite Protocol, but there is basically this discussion in the.
Well, this is it, and like I have read, Protect and Survive, and I have read As Lambs to the Slaughter, which was an academic piece about the atomic weapons that was written in the 80s. So I've got, I know that there's, and I know about, the miles and miles of tunnels that exist under most of our major metropolitan areas that were built as bomb shelters to allow the important business of government to continue after the civilian population have been turned into radioactive cinders.
Excuse me, I'm just having a cough sweet. Excuse me.
So, yeah, right. So, I mean, like, obviously, but then what really freaked me out was when they started saying it was the specific, and in the case of the novella, The Finite, where the Finite protocol is triggered, but it's never named because the characters involved would know. Steve was asked to change the title.
The title?
So, yeah. No, it's really.
That's actually very peculiar. Of all the. Because most of the stuff I've experienced since has been ambient, it's just stuff that's happened in culture, in conversation.
Well, more importantly, right, George, more importantly, stuff that hasn't happened, right?
Right.
That's the real thing. It's been this kind of, I don't want conspiracy of silence is too strong, but it's been this invisibility field around the whole fucking thing, right?
Yes, again, it's that feeling as well as it's that Mandela effect feeling that you get because of it, where. That part of me, you walk down the street, it has changed kind of like the way I operate in society and the way I operate in culture. Because it's not the kind of thing where you can't function or where, you are so divorced from everything that you just cannot engage. But you do find yourself like walking down the street or talking to co-workers or to friends, and you're like, you know what this was. You know. Yeah. Part of you somewhere, no matter how many layers of sublimation you've built up, protect yourself or whatever, or no matter how you've re-narrativized it or rewritten it in your mind. I mean, that's the other thing. There's no I went looking for this before we came on. I just thought, is there something out there which tried to soften it all, which just, like a narrative that said, oh, it was all just a weird magic trick or a hoax or a social experiment gone weirdly awry or whatever, and there's not even that. If there was that out there, if there was some attempt to mitigate it and soften it, I would almost understand the cultural reaction,
Yeah, no, there's never been any explanation.
Nothing.
And at this point I can't imagine there will be. But it's talking about the blackout in the media. I mean, the really interesting thing on that, and actually I've got to be honest, I did as much research as I could for this one. Most of my research of necessity involved having conversations with people, conversations that were off the record. In most cases,
That must have been bloody hard as well, Kit, to be honest.
It's-
I mean, did you find it hard drawing people on it, like approaching it?
yeah, oh god, yeah. No, it was really difficult, and it was even like, I mean, I started with family and friends, and most of them wouldn't even, you know. And again,
isn't it? Because it could, it could. I mean, at the time, did you like lose friends or anything over it? Was there anyone who sort of like, just if you tried to talk to them, that was it? It's like, no, I'm not dealing with that.
I mean, I wouldn't go that far, but I certainly there were a fair few people in my life who made it very, very clear that it wasn't a topic for conversation.
Yes, yeah,
Just
I had that
super
too.
clear. Just drew the boundary. And, and by the way, I'll always respect that. That's fine.
Yes, I mean, by God, yeah. If it's not something, I mean, given the circumstances everybody's under, and the pressures that people are facing, if people don't want to talk about it, they don't want to talk about it. I totally get that, but it's the degree, isn't it? Like, even
it is.
I have so many friends who are really deviant, really politically, socially, they will talk about absolutely anything. They have that thing where they don't have the blinkers that most other people have. They will look at it and they will talk about it in these terms. They will talk about the systemic issues that we face, even if it's taboo, even if it's something other people won't talk about, but not this.
No,
not this.
But the interesting thing about the media blackout is I saw a recent piece that suggests that it may not have been as complete or as total as we initially thought, and also it does give some credence to the idea that it was at least partly algorithmic in nature. So Steve Toes wrote this brilliant piece for Ginger Nuts. I don't know if you got a chance to see it, but basically. But by the way, Steve Toes is he's a fiction author. He's also written many times for 14 Times, so he's done a bit of journalism in his time as well.
Right.
And he uncovered a collection of apparently disparate news stories that had happened in the sort of in the early 2020. So like the first sort of 6 to 9 months, they'd surfaced, and the thing that they all had in common was they all appeared in local newspapers rather than national ones.
Interesting.
Yeah, and here's the really weird part: they all appeared in the print editions, but they weren't in the online archives. And when Steve approached the various paper editors about why isn't this in your online archive, like no one would talk to him.
Well, I imagine they wouldn't
pick up the phone. They wouldn't acknowledge it. But he's seen the clippings. He knows that they're real stories. And even there, all they are is literally like someone's fly tipped a bunch of apparently brand new, airline style suitcases. Right, and they're all the same make and model and color, but no one knows. No, they haven't been reported stolen. There was another one. Actually, there was a really weird one. I can't remember which area it was, where they'd had it was quite grisly. Apparently, like half a dozen bodies had turned up in cases.
In the cases.
Yeah.
That's isn't it? I wonder what.
But that's the kind of thing, right? This is the thing that made it once into a local newspaper. How the hell is that not a national headline? Do you know what I mean?
You're not wrong with that. Yeah. Surely, I mean, that's almost the MO of a serial killer, right?
Well, exactly. So why is it being reported in the? I'm making up the name, but like the Paisley Shopper. Why is that not?
And how is it that has not been the fodder of internet channels, like YouTube channels, the ones that go for the great unexplained or unexplored mysteries and the grisly stuff, the true crime stuff? How is that not everywhere?
I tell you how fucked up it is. It's not even on the dark web, because I've got contacts there, and I've got people I'm in touch with who are monitoring that stuff and keeping an eye on it. Even there, nothing. Not even fucking memes. Like, it is weird. And that bothers me. That really does.
Too. I must admit, there's I'm quite prone to paranoia because of my my mental health issues and whatnot, and it's something I endlessly fight against. And that does twinge. I've got to say, it is the kind of thing where you could spin any kind of narrative out of that. It does seem to be really like.
But it's like, because who's got the capacity to do that, right? I mean, that's the thing for me when I look at that. And that was, to be honest, that was one of the most chilling things during the research of the book, but also having researched it, then to see it happen in real time as I'm trying to deliver a publicity campaign for the book, right?
Yes.
and just seeing social media posts disappear, and then hearing about, oh, I mean, Jim got it as well. Jim said the algorithm across the site had been down for like 3 weeks. Yeah. Oh, yeah. But here's the kicker: the traffic to the archive of My Life in Horror, which mainly contains the articles I wrote, zero traffic.
Zero.
And he's never seen zero traffic on the site over a period of weeks before. Like, because it's a big site, it's really popular. Everyone visits, and people visit the archive. I mean, it will get he'll get dozens of clicks on the archive a week. Zero to My Life in Horror.
Accidents, you would get some. You would get people who like just type in the title of whatever subject you would.
Just the Wayback Machine taking a snapshot. You'd see some activity. It's almost impossible to have zero activity.
Have zero, if a web page exists, it's almost impossible to have zero activity, isn't it? That's really, that is the kind of thing that.
And it's bollocks. I mean, look, I can't prove it, but I know for a fact that during that time, as it happens, I was doing some archive diving for some links because I'd written something new and I wanted to link back to a piece I'd written on there. So there should have been at least one. Yeah. Just from me, right? Like, yeah. So
I mean, that makes me. I mean, I don't get me wrong. I am not putting this up or anything like that. It's going up. It's absolutely going up. But it makes me like I'm going to have to like batten down the hatches a little bit, right?
Yeah. I mean, we'll see what happens, because the interesting thing is, since we actually managed to launch the book, and there's a funny story to tell around that, because it nearly didn't.
I'll bet.
But since the launch at FantasyCon, it does seem like whatever throttling effect has happened is starting to ease off a bit.
Oh, isn't that? I mean, why? I mean, surely if it was a problem for whatever or whoever, then the fact of the book existing would be still a problem, right?
I mean, yeah, I have been, obviously, as you may imagine, I have given it some thought. Now, I've been very careful to start with to market the book as fiction, and I've always done that, and I think that I'd hope that would eliminate the problem completely. It hadn't.
Yeah, right. I mean, by the way, guys, just to be very clear, Kit's book, Millionaire's Day, it is a fictionalized account of the event, right?
Yeah,
you've taken it's like people writing about World War II or something like that. It's a fictionalized account of the actual day. Yeah, it's not meant to be like a documentary or anything like that.
No. And I mean, if you want in a bit, if it's useful, we could talk about the process for that, because I think that was quite interesting.
Yeah, well. I am really intrigued, actually. I mean, one of the things that I did want to mention is, like, because of the incredible taboo surrounding this, it is the kind of thing where just the fact of you writing a book about it, like a fictional book about it, is probably going to get you some flack, and probably already has, right?
Well, yeah, absolutely. And I said, I mean, aside from the falling out with Jasper, which is very unfortunate, but I've also,
it's sad. That's really sad. That is.
It is a shame, and as I say, I mean, I'm still hopeful that we'll be able to resolve it in due course, because he's been a good friend down the years, and
you make good work. The podcast is great. It really is.
Yeah, I think we make a good team there. So I'm hoping we can figure out a way to patch things up.
Maybe it's a case of like you agree to not talk about it. Maybe that's.
Yeah, I mean, I think it may come to that, something similar. I mean, the interesting thing is that Laura Melrose, who was at the launch, and she's been very kind of behind the scenes supportive of me, but she was talking about maybe doing some mediation down the line. So I don't know. We'll see.
Good idea. I mean, Laura's a good egg for that. So
Yeah, and kind of trusted by both parties. So we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens there. But yeah, I mean, there was some fallout, and as I say, I mean, it runs the gamut, right? I had friends and family who were just like, "We're not talking about this ever." I mean, I've lost a couple of friends. There's a couple of people who, once they found out the book was coming out, were just like, "I can't talk to you anymore."
That was it. Interesting. I mean, very interesting. I do, on a purely abstract level, I get that kind of parameter, because there are certain things which, I'm the same. I won't engage with, and it is too much. It's I mean, going back to COVID, it was the anti-vax thing. I just wouldn't.
Oh yeah.
I lost a couple of friends to that.
I mean, I think what's disappointing in this case is I think most, maybe not all, but the vast majority of the people I can think of who are in that category work in some kind of government employment.
Oh.
So, yeah, they're either civil servants or they're connected to various wings of various emergency services, and it's
That's
I mean, it is what it is, but you know,
it is. I mean, that's another thing, right? I mean, surely on the day. I mean, I don't really know because I was kind of cloistered. You know, my sphere of operation was quite small on the day. But surely there were emergencies. Surely there were things that happened as a result of what happened on Millionaire's Day that like required the attention of the emergency services. So why aren't there records of that? Why isn't there stories about that?
right? This is the thing, and it's so weird as well because everyone knows the story. Even people who aren't engaged, you know, who weren't engaged in the conversation around millionaire stuff, but most people
They know what happened. They know what happened.
they do. But also, this is really telling. Most people who were around on that day, if you can get a couple of drinks inside them, will tell you some story about some weird shit that went down.
But it's none of them, is it? It's like
no.
yeah, it's
someone
always
they knew or
like
someone they knew.
you know, cousin of a friend of a
Yeah. But it's like someone who went missing, or some crime that got committed that never got resolved, or some act of vandalism or arson. I mean, my God, you know, like there's plenty of instances in various towns and cities of fires that raged out of control for hours. Everybody knows about that, but it's not in the news anywhere. It's not, but like everyone knows a neighborhood that on that day ended up, you know, dealing with some significant like fire damage that didn't get resolved, or at least didn't get resolved until the emergency services turn up, like, you know, way towards the afternoon, way towards afternoon, early evening, which is, I mean, based on research I've done, I think that's when the Finite protocol, you know, after the initial withdrawal period and rebriefing, that's when they started allocating resources again to emergency services, which would fit. Because this is the other thing, I had at least one account of someone, and I have no idea who this person is because I didn't know anything about them until I stumbled across their blog, and I don't know how their blog managed to get through.
You know, so maybe one managed to survive whatever. Like
I tell you what,
desolation.
What's weird about this guy's blog, and this is the bit that this is like, this doesn't make any sense. This blog is a blog covering conspiracy theories. It's very low level. I mean, I'd never heard of it. I never heard of the guy involved. I still don't know who he is, or she, I guess, actually in real life. But they'd run this conspiracy theory blog. Apparently, they've been running it for 3 or 4 years. But when you go to the site now, there's literally only 3 posts on there, and they're all very recent. And the most recent one is the Millionaire's Day one, and everything else has been scrubbed. Now, what the fuck is that about?
Doesn't make any sense at all.
It's
I mean, maybe
so weird.
Part of me, again, that paranoid part of me that whinges, says that maybe the reason it's left up on that site, because they are known as a conspiracy theorist,
right?
Diminishes the significance, right?
Yeah, and then
it makes it seem like a conspiracy theory, like a myth, you know.
Right, and then the scrubbing, of course, is both a punishment to them, but also discredits the site as a whole, right?
Yes.
Because if you see a site that's only been around for like 3 or 4 weeks and it's only got one actual conspiracy theory, it's been an Millionaire's Day, you look at it and say, oh, well, that's just marketing, right? That's just some guys set up as like you know. So I mean, that's, you know, I could see like that's relatively sophisticated, but I you know, that feels at least plausible to me. But the interesting thing about this guy's story is he's writing from somewhere in continental Europe, and he got his case out of the country on the day. Right, and I was really surprised about that because I mean, you know, based on other research I did, I was pretty sure that they closed the borders, and they did, but they didn't close the borders until the afternoon, because the Finite protocol, when it first came into force, they had to centralize everyone before they could make the decisions about where to allocate. So there was a brief window, and again, I cannot tell you where I got this information from, but there was a brief window between about 10:30 and 12:30 or 1 o'clock on Millionaire's Day, where there was basically no fucking security anywhere. Like, there was no cops, there was no ambulance, and crucially, no border control. And that, I think, is when this guy must have been getting on his flight. Because he shouldn't have been able to do it, right? A suitcase full of money shouldn't have made it through the X-ray scanner.
Right.
But I think, like I say, I think what was going on was that he just, I mean, it's like fucking Mr. Magoo time. He just walked blindly through the middle of it and just lucked out and caught that one moment.
My God.
There was that open window. The luck, so fucking weird, yeah.
The bloody luck of that! I can't even. I mean, like, the chances are like I don't know what the calculation would be. You know what the number would be. It must be like infinitesimal.
I mean, since then I did a bit more digging around, and it looks like the other bit of international transportation that did a lot of good business that day. Well, 2 of them. One was the ferries to Northern Ireland.
Again, makes sense. Makes
They
sense.
were,
They're much easier to black. They're much easier to get through.
there was
Without
a
anyone.
massive surge in on the day,
Mm.
paying by cash tickets, right? Massive,
Mm.
like unprecedented, never heard of it. Every
Yeah.
single ferry was like overloaded. Again, until late afternoon when they suddenly, all the border security turned up, they started scanning the cases, which they never do on ferries. And again, you won't find any of this anywhere. No news stories, nothing.
Mhm.
The other one was, and this shouldn't be a surprise, was the Eurostar. And again,
Obviously,
exactly the same thing. Tons and
yes.
tons of passengers turning up, cash in hand, trying to buy tickets, massively oversubscribed. All and again, that period from like 10 till about 1, half 1, 2 o'clock. Suddenly there's border security everywhere, and the cash sales die off again. You can find it if you go digging around deep in the company records. It's there, or at least I've seen versions of it, but they're not in the public domain. I mean, the day-to-day sales, ticket sales just aren't. Good luck getting them out of there. But
I can't even imagine like the depth of research that had to go on for this. I mean, like even more so than most other events of its kind, right?
Well, this
because
is the thing.
you're just trying to find the bloody information. It's
for stuff like, I mean, this is the thing, right? For the Finite, it was pretty straightforward. All I had to do was research nuclear weapons. In fact, I didn't even have to do that because the lead character in the Finite, was a child of the 80s CND movement. All I had to do was research what the 80s CND propaganda was about nuclear weapons, right? Because that's what he thought was the truth.
Yeah.
So I didn't
not
even
the
have to
reality,
worry.
right?
I didn't have to worry about whether it was realistic or not. I just had to read some stuff that was written in the 80s that was aimed at that audience and say, okay, that's what he understands, that's what he believes, and his decisions will be made on that. I still don't know if they're accurate or not. I don't need to. I got what I needed to make the fiction.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Song for the end, even easier because I'm just making it all up, right? So, So the only research there is understanding the layout of Milton Keynes and a bit of research on like the route from Milton Keynes to London. That's like 20 minutes in Google Maps, right? But this fucker, and here's the thing, George. Yeah, there's absolutely, you're right. It's tough anyway because you're trying to research something that really happened. But I swear that like literally every single thing. I'm writing an article about this actually for Divination Hollow at the moment. How do you research something that doesn't exist? How do you research something that isn't anywhere? It's not on the internet. It's not on the media. It's not on the dark web. I tell you how you do it. It's just conversations. It
has to be like word of mouth, doesn't it? It just has to be conversations. I mean, because all that's left really are the impressions that people don't want to have, apparently.
Exactly. And it's friends, and it's friends of friends, and it's friends of friends of friends. And the interesting thing I will say is, like, for all we've talked about people blanking it and blacking it out and all that, and there has been a lot of that, and I've had a lot of resistance, and you know, so I've lost friends about it, and I'm rowing with other friends about it. But there have, and I've got to acknowledge this, there have been a lot of people who have shown me extraordinary personal courage by being willing to talk.
Well, I think, I do think there's an appetite for it. I mean, it's very small and it's very suppressed, but like there are those of us who are just not made that way, who just cannot put the blinkers on, the scabs don't form, the wounds keep bleeding,
Well, and this is something I was trying to explain to Jasper before the whole conversation went south, like, especially in the writing community, of course, because it's who we are naturally. We are not people who are inclined to look away. We're not people who are inclined to rationalize. A lot of the reason why a lot of us write, especially genre fiction, especially horror, is because we're wrestling with the things that we struggle to understand about the world. We're wrestling with those things that stick in our teeth and stick in our shoes, stick in our feet, that make it hard for us to understand how we, how this human experiment continues to stagger forwards. That's the stuff that we are almost compelled to write about. So of course something like Millionaire's Day is going to stick in our minds particularly.
It's something it's a splinter, isn't it? It's a splinter. You can't leave the damn thing alone because and it's got everything that minds like ours and imaginations like ours will naturally obsess over.
Right, exactly.
Because it's kind of narrative by its very nature. I mean, like the event itself. Yeah. Like the thing itself. I mean, I'm such a fucking light sleeper because just naturally and because of my job, I hear one of my guys cough or turn over and as I'm up, Sure. So how? The magic trick of it.
Right.
The magic trick of it, which is simultaneously kind of brilliant and kind of sinister. I don't. It's still scares me a little bit, I'll be honest. But it
Yeah.
also it scares me, but at the same time, I'm sort of like part of me that's inclined to magical thinking, kind of loves it in a
Oh, yeah.
weird way because it's a weird like it's like if you happen to have a personal experience of a ghost or something, isn't it? You know,
You and I have talked about this a lot, right? Like, this is
right.
one of the reasons we're attracted to a lot. I mean, we talked about this a lot in the context of Barker, right?
Hmm.
One of the reasons we both find Barker's work so incredibly attractive is because what he's genius at is creating that sense where the supernatural or the magical interacts with the real world and it feels seamless, and suddenly you see a way that it could happen. And then, but here's the thing, like, that's fine when it's a book called We Build and you can put it down. When it's something you can actually remember happening, it turns out not quite so comfortable. And a lot of people will do anything to tell themselves it didn't happen. I mean, the character of Henry Jones, who opens the stories, is a homeless guy sleeping rough in Milton Keynes. Now, that was based on not one, but a composite of conversations I had with homeless people in Milton Keynes over the last 2 or 3 years. We have got, not as big as we used to, thankfully, but there is still a homeless contingent in MK. Obviously, by its nature, it's transient, and you know, people join it and people leave it. In a lot of cases, thankfully, to get into sheltered or secure accommodation. Obviously, sadly, sometimes they die. But what was interesting about that was, well, two things. One, I mean, this isn't surprising, but I did find that community was far more likely and willing to talk to me than most others. And I guess that makes sense.
That does make sense, given that they're kind of you know, disregarded by the systems that be. They're outside of them, you know.
But the interesting thing was that the correlation was even there, no one was willing to speak other than under anonymity, and none of them would even allow me to record the conversations, like because you know, I had my phone. I was like, well, can I just? And they just wouldn't have it.
And you have to. I mean, that is very strange, actually, because there is an element of you know, what have you to lose? You know, this is not going to affect you like someone who maybe has a house and has a presence and has a career, whatnot, you know.
But the thing is, you were talking earlier about the scarring and the scabbing and that kind of thing. I think actually for a lot of the people, well, I know this from a lot of the people I spoke to in that community, it was, the pain of it was still incredibly raw. Because for many of them, there was this moment of hope, followed by an even greater kind of crushing despair. Right? And it was really acute. And again, there's specific things that happened to Henry in the first hour of the narrative that I've written are absolutely, that's not one person's story. It's a composite based on a bunch of things I heard from a bunch of different people. But everything that happened to Henry happened to somebody.
Right. So, like,
and that's just the homeless people in Milton Keynes, by the way. So you know, extrapolate out to the homeless population of London, the homeless population of Glasgow, homeless population like Bristol, Liverpool, Birmingham, right? Like, and again, these are. It's less surprising that's made the news because cynically, those are people that just don't get talked to by journalists. Full stop. Anyway.
Of course, yes. Because I mean, societally, we just like turn a blind eye. We don't like. I mean, they in many respects they kind of manifest exactly what we're talking about because that's like we just don't like to see, right? We don't like to acknowledge. We don't like the fact of them. Because they are evidence of the systems going wrong, right? They are evidence that the systems are not doing what they proclaim to be doing.
I'm really glad you said that because actually one of the really telling things about that was when I spoke to them. One of the things, obviously, because I talked to everyone about, like, well, what's your theory as to why this never made the news? And they were just staring at me and like, we never make the fucking news. What are you talking about?
Never made, what you're talking about, right? I mean, fair enough, right? But I mean, like, what? But it is still strange, isn't it? Because the phenomena itself, you know, the logistics, the tech, the mechanics of it are just not there.
I mean,
in rational terms, like I cannot dope this out rationally. I can't. I don't know how this occurred. But even you know, looking at it in magical terms, looking at it in magical thinking terms, I'm sort of like, well, let's assume that it was magical, you know, that it was a like some weird miracle or something. Then it's a fucking petty, weird, materialist miracle, isn't it?
so
Like, if
so
it
strong.
if it was gonna if it was gonna manifest spontaneously something, why didn't it just like magically make everything utopian and wonderful? Why didn't it like elevate us to another state of being? Why do this?
So yeah, and it kind of whatever angle you come at it, right? Like if it's some kind of human magical, some incredible, spell of some kind, right?
Right.
Who
So like
who
a manifestation of like the yearning and the need
right?
in
Who
us for
who and
within these
who and why?
systems.
But who and why would pick it to go this way? If
Right.
it's some kind of religious thing, right?
Mm,
So if it's some kind of deity that's decided
right.
this, well, what's the moral lesson?
God, it'd be Manon. It'd be Mammon, wouldn't it? It'd be the demon Mammon that did that. Oh
I
dear.
mean, there's certain cults or sects of the Christian religion I can imagine.
Oh yeah, me
Look,
too.
if we've got if you're going to believe in a trickster god that buries dinosaur bones in the earth
Fair enough.
to fuck with people and make them believe in evolution when
Yeah,
creation is the truth, that guy, yeah, maybe he would do it just to
yeah.
fuck with
This
them.
is small potatoes in comparison to that, I suppose, isn't it?
Yeah. So I
Um,
mean, sure, but again, I can't quite like what's the moral object lesson.
but
And
what's the
again,
point?
like
That's
if
the
it's
thing, right?
right, or if you go the Arthur C. Clarke route, right, and you say, well, any technology sufficiently advanced looks like magic.
Right.
But then you're still left with the same problem. Like, why the fuck does ET
It
decided? And why Great
feels.
Britain and Northern Ireland? I mean, this is, I swear to God. So, sorry, it's a bit of a digression. I was talking to Tracy Fahey about it
Yeah.
and I mean, I don't know, she's a busy woman. But I'm hoping she's actually going to produce a piece for me at some point about
Oh,
the Millionaire's Day effect on the border. Because
interesting.
she was talking, because she lives near the border. She lives in the Republic of Ireland. Of course, it didn't happen in the Republic of Ireland because,
Right.
and apparently there are some very, very interesting stories about what occurred on the border.
Yeah, because like borders are by their very nature arbitrary, right?
Exactly, and clearly man-made, right? I mean, obviously man-made. So again, if you're looking at supernatural or, I mean,
Why would it
extraterrestrial, I guess.
respect? Yeah, why would it respect
Exactly.
borders and
Yeah.
boundaries and whatnot? Why would it have any? It feels. I mean, it's so weird. It feels almost like it lacks intention to me.
Right.
Like there is no design. It's almost like a far, not necessarily supernatural. It's something, again, going back to the Mandela effect. It's almost like some weird lit in the Matrix. In reality, it's weird, right? I
Well,
just
like,
can't.
for me, it's like if the afterlife were a civil service that was written by Douglas Adams, right? You can imagine someone in there just accidentally
Yeah,
pressing the button
pressing a
that
button
makes the
or
money
getting something
appear in the
wrong.
thing and just be like,
Yeah,
oops, sorry,
but
boss. But yeah,
it doesn't it make you really I mean, I've said before I have these problems with paranoia and whatnot, but this
sure.
really does. It did take me a while to recohere after this, and it still gets to me. It still gets to me because it does seem to mean that reality is kind of not quite as fixed, whether it's rational or not.
I mean,
You know?
I've been stubborn about it. Obviously, I kind of had to be to write the book,
Yeah.
and I've kind of kept my head down and kept the bit between my teeth. It's just like, well, I know this is true. I know this is what happened, and also, like, look, I mean, I think that's just a trait in me, and that's something I've had to do. I mean, there's something we've got in common, right? Our politics has had to train us to be a bit stubborn, right? Because you will find yourself in positions frequently where people will be trying to tell you that black is white and up is down, and I like to think,
certainly.
I like to think I've got I've developed slowly. It's not perfect, but I've developed a bit of a kind of moral core on that kind of stuff. Where it's like, no, I kind of know what I know. But I will say, interestingly, the campaign, I thought that's where I was at, and then when I tried to do the campaign in the launch of the book, and I started hearing what shit my publishers were dealing with as well, that was when the paranoia really started kicking for me. That's when I started to feel wobbly about it, because it was like I say, I thought, 5 years have passed. Everyone, I mean, to be honest, I thought no one was going to give a shit, because I thought,
you thought it's like almost like forgotten now, right? That it's just almost whatever,
Yeah, I mean, I think as well, and like COVID kind of did overshadow it, and rightly so. It was a far
rightly
bigger
so, right? Big,
global disaster, but it kind of, I think it was very. I mean, now I think that was very full. And by the way, I'm not a conspiracy theorist on this. I genuinely think it was very fortunate timing, and I think that's what it was on the part of the powers that be in the UK, because it gave them something else to point at, and for us to kind of to deal with and process. But I was genuine. I mean, that's naive, I guess, but I was genuinely shocked at the kind of, as I say, I mean, not so much at the human reaction, but at that kind of just literally not being able to talk about it online, not being able to get those communications in front of anyone. And the fucking publisher, I mean, my God, I don't know if you've seen the footage from the launch that we put on Facebook, but like, we had to set up, he managed to get the print run done, but we couldn't get the print run done in the UK. The UK Lightning source, it just wouldn't, and it wasn't anything to do with the company that we can make out, just literally the order wouldn't go through. He eventually got the print the print versions of the book sent to himself in the US. He had to bring them over in a steel case on the airplane. Must have spent a fortune.
I was going to say,
to get that thing on, the extra weight on the luggage. And then he got stopped at fucking customs. He only just made it. I mean, literally, I'm sitting there in a book launch with 3 other people, and I'm like, "Can you guys go first? Because I don't know if
you don't have your books, right?
I don't know if it's going to get here." And I honestly didn't think it was going to. I honestly thought I was going to have to beg people to go online and kind of, do the pre-order and hope for the best. And then thank God he turned up. Case, but it was last minute, and it was that thing of like, and that thing of opening the case and seeing them there and just thinking like, okay,
it's done, it's there, right? I mean, but Jesus, I mean, it does make you wonder what the future of this of your publication of your book is, doesn't it? It makes you wonder, like, well, what's going to happen to it when it's out there, when it's in people's hands, when it's like in stores and whatnot? Right.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, again, what I take heart from is how many of the people that I've spoken to about it in our arena, in the creative arena, have, kind of been very gracious about it and agreed to talk about it themselves, have thanked me for bringing it up in some cases, which is really lovely. But most importantly, have gotten behind me. I mean, all 3 of the publishers, I can't say enough nice things about them. They all
I mean, like, absolutely. I mean, like, kudos to them for doing it, because, as I say, they must have anticipated, they must have known when they were doing it that they were going to get some pushback,
Yeah, I mean, French press, as I say, they're an American publisher, and the guy who runs it is very kind of, he's really kind of gung-ho freedom of the press kind of guy. So he was always like, I mean, he was kind of like, bring it on, I mean, I told him about it, and he kind of laughed it off, and he was like, it's fine. And to be fair, he's laughing a bit less now. He has to lug that fucking case through.
Yeah, I mean, I imagine he wasn't laughing when he was doing that. I bet he was like, really swearing quite a lot.
Hour 4 in the back room at Heathrow, I imagine he was feeling a little less humorous about it. But he's still like the thing that they didn't understand about that guy is like his ex-services, like the more you push him, the harder he's going to push back.
He's going to just dig his heels in it, just like, screw you, right? I'm doing it.
But again, like, all the credit in the world to Horrific and to Black Shuck, because they got pressured on. Books have been out for years, right? And in the case of Song for the End, British Fantasy Award nominated work, and suddenly they've been asked to change the text, and they just, the way that they just, I mean, because again, I didn't know about it until I saw the public statements. They stood up so strong, and that kind of, I tell you what, that's what's giving me hope about this whole situation.
Yes, I think what I think it is. You are scratching an itch. You really are. There are people out there who need to talk about this because they can't talk about it with anybody else. There needs to be some cultural outlet, because it will become a disease. It will become like the cultural equivalent of a neurosis if it's not expressed and explored properly, if it's sublimated the way it has been. And I do think that's part of what we're seeing out there, definitely, with the denialism, with the profoundly, almost like aggressive reactions that you're getting to daring to write a book about this, daring to write a piece of fiction about this 5-year-old event,
Well, and also, like, I mean, I don't want to be too paranoid about this, but I do think, I mean, now I think about it a bit more, when we think about what we're likely to be facing in the next 50 to 100 years as a planet and also as a society, and the necessity for, if the current power structures are going to sustain themselves beyond a certain point, the necessity for a kind of combination of a kind of children of men militarism and but coupled with control of information.
Yeah, that's the big one, isn't it? Right. That's the big one. That's the real kicker.
And I kind
It's
of
yeah,
feel like, in a way, it's almost like Millionaire's Day was kind of, or is kind of like a dry run worked
I
example
was
of just
yeah.
how tight they can control the narrative.
Mm.
And it's
And it's worrying to the degree that it's been successful in that regard. It's really worrying because I know for a
yeah,
fact that people listening to this and they'll be maybe even telling themselves, they may even it may have got that far where it's like, what are they talking about?
oh, I'm sure the
I don't
comments is
remember
going to be
this.
full of
And
like,
oh, it's going to be
did
great.
this
Oh,
happen? Is this
honestly,
real? What are you talking
yeah,
about? Was this
yeah,
just a
that's exactly
marketing
what it's.
campaign? I get that all the
That's what
time.
it's going to be. Yeah, that's what it's going to be. I have no doubt. I mean, I haven't like given any preamble to this. I haven't said that we were going to be doing this. It would have been interesting to see what would have happened to the channel if
Yeah,
we had.
I mean, and again, I'm really hopeful that, as I say, post-launch, interestingly, the initial things I've heard from all of the publishers is that the throttling appears to have disappeared. Jim said the same
Good,
thing, and
good.
certainly as well. I mean, there were a couple of blog posts. James Everington posted, I mean, a beautiful like vignette on his own site of his, not his memories, obviously, a fictional account of
Yeah, yeah.
his memories, but just, I mean, a gorgeous piece of writing, but also really kind of moving. I felt really touching.
Yeah.
I'd say Steve Toes' journalism that's out there now, and I've had other people at FCon saying like, well, can I write something about it? And I've said, yeah. I mean, as
Yeah,
I say, Tracy's planning to do something hopefully, and
I think
it's
I might
like,
myself, actually. I think I might myself. If Jim is
yeah,
willing to put it up,
sure,
like
sure,
after
sure.
the bullshit that is put up with, if
I
he's
mean,
willing, I'll do a My Life. I mean, it's perfect for My Life in Horror, actually, now that
sure.
I think about it. It's perfect, isn't it?
I mean,
It's like it is, it is an example of something really bloody weird that
I've got to be
happened
honest.
to us.
It's my biggest regret, because the problem I had was when I was writing My Life in Horror, I set myself this arbitrary thing about like it's got to be.
It's got to be fiction. It's got to be media, right? It's got to be
Well,
like.
no, not
No?
at all. No, I wrote about 9/11.
Oh, of
No, it
course you
wasn't
did.
that.
Yeah.
It was the age thing. I didn't want it to be. I wanted it to be about formative experiences.
Oh, okay.
And for me, because Millionaire Days was 2019, it was just too recent.
Too
And
recent, right?
it
Interesting.
was perfect. And I talked about it as well. I did talk to Jim at one point about doing, and this is maybe a year or two ago, about doing just a general kind of thought piece about it. But I don't know. The time didn't feel right, and
Right. I think at that point as well, people just wouldn't have gone for it. It would have been. I think the reaction would have been more extreme than now.
I mean, it might have been, but also I just think I hadn't really. I mean, I hadn't done the research. I hadn't done the work.
Right.
I wasn't really fully formed, and I think it would have been too impressionistic. And also, I've got to be honest, and I encourage anyone listening to this who is thinking about sharing their stories, and
Please
God
do.
bless you for your courage if you do. But
yes, please do. If you guys, if you have anything about your experience of Millionaire's Day, post it, please. I'm so interested. I'm so intrigued.
Do that, but I think what I'd also say is, be sure if you do it to express it as being a work of fiction for legal purposes. Cover yourself in that way, and and anonymize it, either by telling the story in an assumed name or changing certain details, whatever. But do something to kind of, because that's just protect yourself a bit.
Just
you know
to,
what I mean?
Yeah. It may sound
honest,
paranoid, but just do that.
I got to be honest, George. A part of me is worries that if I'd actually just done a My Life in Horror style telling my story, I don't know, man. I don't know. I just don't know.
I'm very. I mean, I am.
Here's the thing, right? Nobody's done. I mean, even me with this book, nobody tells their own story. People will talk about people they know, stuff they heard, right? Or they'll put out these fictionalized whatevers. Like, no one's actually just standing up and saying, "Yeah, this is what happened to me," and I don't blame them. And honestly, my advice is, I really wouldn't, because I'm not sure. I think a combination of things. I think 5 years have gone past. I think having an American publisher helps, because it does limit the amount of pressure that can be brought to bear. And it helps that it's someone who's clearly up for a fight as well. They probably don't like that either. I do actually think the fact that Jim and the two presses all stood up and said, no, fuck you. I think that's probably helped too, because they're not Horrific, Black Shuck, Jim, Ginger Horror. None of these are massive national entities or anything, but they are massively respected.
They are. They have presence, don't they?
And they've got presence, and I think there's enough light on them. Exactly. That I think, they kind of have the protection of the crowd to a certain degree. It's kind of hard You know, they don't want to push this thing to, because look, here's the thing, right? I think whatever the entity or power, whether it's the British government, whether it's security services, whether it's something else that is behind this, I think for me it seems fairly clear that what they want is they want it to just be as quiet as possible. That's the thing that makes the most sense of the response I've seen to this point. And I think they kind of realize, like, if someone relatively prominent in a community disappears, that's actually going to cause more problems, not less.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Or even if it's just like, if like Ginger Nuts went down or so it just disappeared, there would be outcry. It would be insane.
This is it. Right?
But also, I mean, like, I don't know, maybe what the way it's transpiring is now just another part of whatever social experiment it might be. You know, who knows? Maybe it's interesting.
Yeah. I hadn't really thought of that, but you might be right. I mean, I get the feeling, and it's no more than feeling an impression based on the early response since the book launch.
Mm-hmm.
I do feel like that kind of bullshit is starting to recede. And maybe, look, I think at this point, to be honest, they're probably just that. My best guess, and that's all this is. I don't have any inside information, obviously, because I don't know what's behind it. My best guess is they're looking at it now and going, yeah, but he's just some indie horror author. No one's going to take it seriously. He's calling it a work of fiction. Let's just let it go out there, and let's not give him the oxygen of publicity of suppression. Let's just let it take its course.
You know, it's circulating in this little like culture of deviants and weirdos, and nobody's going to take it seriously. So, you know, they're all fictionalists anyway.
Right.
So, you know, if push comes to shove, we can just say, oh, it's this expanded work of fiction, right? It's clearly just an experiment, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and, you know, maybe they're right. But the interesting thing for me is the number of people who would contact me on social media and say, like, either is this a publicity stunt? This is DMs I'm talking about. Is this a publicity stunt? Or like, and this is the really telling one, are you sure it's okay to talk about it now? And every time when I replied to those people, I was like, well, I'm doing it. What was interesting was seeing them then publicly. They started saying, "Oh yeah, I think this is starting to come back to me. Let's have a look at this. Let's and started sort of joining in, and sharing the truth." So, they may be right. They probably are right. It's not going to make enough ripples, but I just have that little bit of hope based on the initial response I've had. Well, maybe this time,
maybe it'll just nudge. Yeah,
it'll punch through a little bit.
Yeah,
and it'll pull people forward.
Well,
I mean, this is the other thing, and it's super early days, who knows? But I have had a conversation with a publisher, and obviously we've got CS sales too. So there's a bottom line involved here, obviously. But it's not impossible if the book does do well, if it does do better than expected, and if we do continue to kind of burst that bubble on it, and we get more people.
Mm-hmm.
There could be in a year or two. There could potentially be an anthology.
Oh, interesting.
I've had a few people who are interested in talking about their stories and figuring out how they could tell them in a safe way.
Oh my God!
And I've been surprised by that. So like, who knows?
Yeah, wow, that could be very interesting indeed.
Yeah. So I don't know, Tales from Millionaires Day or Millionaires Week, maybe, I don't know, but yeah, there'll be something. But I mean, that's down the road. Let's see if we can get the word out first.
Yeah, let's see what happens, right? Let's see what happens.
And as I said, at the book launch, Millionaire's Days is advertised as a work of fiction. It's being sold as a work of fiction, and it is a fictionalized account of the day. There were, I mean, we haven't really talked about it. As I say, I did interview a lot of homeless people. I interviewed a lot of other people as well. I mean, there were a hell of a lot of missing people's cases attached to that day, like a hell of a lot. And I deliberately kind of wove some of that in. And, because, I mean, again, we're horror writers, we know this, right? Sometimes missing means dead. Sometimes it means run away. So I've, and again, without wanting to spoil the narrative, I've incorporated elements of that into the story.
Into the book, into the story,
But fundamentally, I'm comfortable calling Millionaire's Day a work of fiction. But I will also say this, which I said at launch, it is a work of fiction, but it is also the case at this point in our history that fiction, I think now, fiction has become the only place where it's possible to tell the truth.
Yeah, and I couldn't really come up with a better way of concluding it, to be honest, Kit. That's fiction is the place, isn't it? It is the only place at the moment.
I think so.
Wow. So guys, it's out now, Kit. Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, you can go and purchase your copy of Millionaire's Day.
Yeah, God,
A
yeah,
work of
please.
fiction. I
Yeah.
will, just to reassert that, a fictionalized account of the actual day.
Of Winter Solstice 2019 in the United Kingdom. And please do, if you can, please do grab yourself a copy before it fucking disappears. And tell
Absolutely.
people about it too, help spread the word, because it's a real struggle. As you've heard, it's been an incredible struggle too. I mean, it's always a struggle, right? Any indie author getting over the noise is almost impossible, but this one,
But this is
anything like it.
This is something else. This has been something else. I've sort of observed it from the fringes, and it has been it's been a weird thing. It's been a weird thing, and like struggling to keep that paranoia under control has been a one in the face of this.
And I got to say this as well. Thank you, George. Thank you for agreeing to have this conversation with me. Thank you for agreeing to share this to your YouTube site and share it with your audience. Like, it's
my pleasure.
You and the other creatives that have taken that decision to come forward and to step up. You're my secret weapon. You're what I've got.
I think it's been boiling away for a bit. I've kind of wanted to, but again, there's that sense of isolation and that sense of being alone in all of of this, and but seeing that there is actually almost like a community forming around it now, that's a good spur. A good spur.
Going back to where we started the conversation, right? It's the difference between the feeling of a cultural narrative of isolation and then discovering a notion of community and solidarity. And I always knew that the horror community, especially the indie horror community, was this incredibly welcoming and friendly space. But I would never have predicted just the generosity of spirit and the level to which this community has stepped up for me over the last few weeks. I'm genuinely moved and humbled by it, and it means everything. It's been really, really incredible.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, thanks, guys. And thank you for listening, by the way, guys. I mean, I know this has been a weird one. This has been an unusual one for this channel, but thank you so much. On top of the Millionaire's Day, Kit, is there anything else that you'd like to pimp out before we go?
I mean, that's the main thing. I guess, look, if this is all sort of piqued your interest in my work, I guess the thing I'll plug is my Patreon. So patreon.com/Kit Power. For basically $1 a month, you get something new from me every week. Now, something new might be early access to a podcast or an essay or a book review, or it might be early access to my fiction work. Actually, the original draft of Millionaire's Day, which was changed very substantially before the print release, was serialized on Patreon. So if you read Millionaire's Day and you're curious as to especially how the third act of the story originally played out, you can do that. $1 a month gives you access to the new article every week, but it also gives you access to the entire back catalogue of material on Patreon. Most of it is early access, but there is some exclusive content there as well. So yeah, I think that's probably the best thing. Check that out. I'm also currently serializing my new novella, which is really fiction, completely fictionalized. It's called The Test. That's a 20,000 word novella. The final part will be going up in a week or two. And again, $1 a month, you can get caught up on that. And the podcast, there's a Sherlock Holmes podcast on there. There's an occasional podcast I do with my daughter called Power Talk, where we discuss various cultural artifacts. And my Bruce Springsteen podcast is also happening on Patreon first before getting a general release. We've just released a bridging episode where we talk about the Sex Pistols, never mind the bollocks, but our next recorded episode is going to be The River, and is going to feature, and I think this is an exclusive, George, I haven't told anyone this publicly yet. Our guest for The River will be none other than Neil, who hosts the Talking Scared podcast.
Excellent. Neil's great. Neil's a real good egg. Neil's really good fun. No,
he's brilliant. I mean, Talking Scared is one of my favorite podcasts. He's just he's a brilliant guest. Brilliant host, a superb interviewer. And I heard him on the interview he did with Stephen King, Let Slip. Yeah. His other big hero was Bruce Springsteen. And I thought, okay, I've got it. You need to come and talk about Springsteen with me. So, and he picked River. That's his favorite album. So I can't wait. We're recording that this weekend as I talk. So that'll be out, And again, it'll be up on Patreon first. So yeah, patreon.com/kitpower, $1 a month, something new every week. That's what I'm with.
Excellent. Links below, ladies and gents, as per usual. As for myself, knocking back here on Exaggerated Elegy, currently playing the remake of Silent Hill 2, Kit.
Oh
Really
yeah, I
really
hear,
good.
I hear good things. Yeah,
It's really good.
nice.
Against all odds, it's really, really good. Can only play it an hour a night because it's ravaging my nerves.
Oh well, that good. Excellent.
It's making me very, very unhappy in a really good way. You know,
Fantastic.
it's that sadomasochistic hurt me plenty kind of thing that a lot of horror fans have. You know, it's really disturbing and brilliant and just I mean, Bloober, they've done it. They've done it. Well done. Spooktober is going to be starting again soon, very, very soon, a little later than last year. So Jack and Elliot will be back, and we're going to be doing. We've got a kind of loose theme this year, a very loose theme. We're going to be doing folk horror.
Oh,
So
nice.
that's going to be fun. And the first entry into that is arguably going to be like one of the ultimate folk horrors. We're going to be doing Midsommar.
Nice.
Ari Aster's Midsommar coming up relatively soon. That's going to be huge. So if you like the big long form conversations, that's going to be massive. It's going to be huge.
Yeah.
On top of that, if you want to read any of my fiction, you can go to strangeplaygrounds.com, find the links to all of my published work over there, my short story collections and whatnot. Or if you go over to Amazon and type in George Daniel Lee, you'll find my author page. Again, go over to Arrow Films and check out the Quartet of Torment, Hellraiser, UHD, and Blu-ray set. Never going to stop talking about that because Kit and I are on it. We're on the Hellbound disc on the featurette Hell is What They Wanted, which is an hour and 48-minute chat about Hellraiser and Hellbound and Clive Barker and all sorts of stuff. Very proud of that one. Go over Ginger Nuts of Horror. I mean, I am continuing It's My Life in Horror series. There are a couple waiting to go up, actually, at the moment. One of which will be pertinent to what we were talking about tonight. One of which is about the original Alien, actually, which is
nice.
That's a big one. That's a really big one. Formative, absolutely formative for me. So expect that to be long and in depth. You know. Apart from that, I think that's it for me. Kit, I mean, thank you for hitting me up. Thank you for thinking of me to chat about this. You know, because
not at all. Thanks for agreeing to host it. I mean, seriously.
No, honestly, it was something that it is a boil that needed to be lanced. Quite frankly, it needed to be done. And thank you guys at home for listening. Until next time, bye bye.
Oh.